I was literally crying tears of joy. That's the first and only time it's ever happened where I've cried tears of joy. But I was crying tears of joy after that game. We went on to win 7 games in a row, and that's what everyone ended up calling insanity. And then that's when I started hearing all those Lynn puns. My friends knew how much I didn't like it, so they'd always text me and say, "Wow, you're so intelligent, you're very incredible, or you're so inspiring." It's pretty annoying. But during Insanity, I was setting NBA records. I was on the cover of Time magazine. I was given worldwide fame overnight. And I was literally the most trending person on the entire planet, at least until Sai started going down, which I'm not going to do right now. And to top it all off, I got a $25 million contract with the Houston Rockets. And you guys know how much I like to eat, so that comes out to 50 million apple pies, according to my calculations. Someone really likes apple pie. As the 2012-2013 season started, I was supposed to be the cornerstone of the Houston Rockets rebuilding effort. I was supposed to be the new leader, the main guy to finally lead the Rockets back to the NBA playoffs. I was personally expecting to just come in, pick up where I left off, and I remember going on the plane ride over, and I was like, dude, I'm ready to invigorate the city of Houston. And when I got there, they had me on billboards across Houston, and I would drive by and be like, "Oh man, I look really cool." I was like doing some weird pose. But basically, it was all reminders that I was supposed to save Houston basketball. And the most important thing was I was ready to show everyone that Insanity wasn't over. And but as I've seen many times in my life, what actually happened was nothing like what I had planned. First off, we signed James Harden. For those of you guys who don't know him, he's the guy with the big beard. He's my teammate. And when we signed him, I essentially went from kind of being the franchise player to kind of taking a back seat. And on top of that, I started the season playing terribly. Less than 10 games into the season, I started getting benched, and our backup point guards were playing more minutes than I was. And at this point in the season, my stats were significantly worse than the year before. The coaches were losing faith in me. Basketball fans were making fun of me. Journalists were criticizing me. And I remember I would go on Twitter, and my Twitter feed was filled with all types of hateful words, from overrated, overpaid, a flash in the pan, a bust, a nobody. And you know, that obviously didn't make me feel that great, and I became really, really frustrated, and I became really, really anxious. And on December 15th, 2012, I wrote in my diary, I have a diary. It's cool, diaries are manly. I had a diary, and I said, "I'm tired and weary, and I can't wait for the season to end, and it's just begun. I haven't been able to eat as much or sleep as well recently, just tossing and turning in anxiety. What if I lose my spot as a starter? What if I have to be a backup the rest of the season? What happens if my backups are actually better than me?" And at this point, I became so obsessed with being a great basketball player, living up to the expectations, living up to the contract, and just being a starting point guard. I remember I became so obsessed with trying to be Insanity, being this phenomenon that took the NBA and the world by storm. Insanity was supposed to be a breakthrough of some sort, where I went from being stuck on the end of the bench to being able to be free as an up-and-coming player on the court. And I remember Houston was supposed to be a fresh start for me. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a new journey. And I was supposed to be the go-to guy. But most of all, I was supposed to be joyful and free. But what I experienced was literally the opposite. I had no joy, and I felt no freedom. Because I felt chained to the world's lofty expectations. I felt like I had to carry the weight of the world on my own 2 shoulders. And that's why I wrote in my diary, that's why I couldn't really sleep or eat. And I remember I was no fun to be around, I was never smiling, I was never free. And before a game, we were about to play the New Orleans Hornets. I remember in my hotel room, I just kind of broke down in tears because I was so anxious about losing my starting position as a point guard. And at that point, I really had to self-reflect, and I had to ask myself, will I allow myself to listen to what everyone else has to say about me? Will I allow myself to be consumed by my performance on the court, to be consumed by my job? Because every day I was basing my self-worth on how many points I scored or how many games I started. I was basing my self-esteem on my ability to be the player that everyone else expected me to be. But my identity should never have been in basketball in the first place. And this was when God showed me I really needed an identity check. So what did I have to do? First, I had to reprioritize my life. I told myself, I'm no longer going to listen to everyone else's voice. And in fact, I'm not even going to listen to my own voice. I had to get back to listening to God's voice. I had to get back to being who God made me to be. In other words, I had to return to my identity as one of God's children rather than trying to be Linsanity, which was an identity created by the world. So, my challenge to you today is this. Think about yourself. Who are you? What is your identity? That's why this event tonight is called Identity Unleashed. Because tonight, you need to find out what your identity is. And in order to know the answer to that question, you have to know what makes you the happiest or the most proud of yourself. You have to know what makes you the saddest or what makes you feel like you're not worth anything. You have to know what gives you your self-worth and your feeling of importance. For me, I couldn't find joy or feel important on any given day unless I played like Linsanity. Unless I played well enough to drown out the voice of all the haters and to hear the praise of all my supporters. Everyone listens to a voice, and you need to know what voice you listen to. Because the voice you listen to the most is where your identity is. And so I want to ask you, whose voice do you hear the loudest in your life? It could be the voice of your peers, the voice of your parents, the voice of your boyfriend or your girlfriend. It could be the voice of your boss. Do you become extremely sensitive to criticism? Or do you become deflated when your boss critiques you or gives you a bad review? It could also be the voice of things that you want. It could be the voice of money, beauty, reputation, power. It could be the voice of your job or your schoolwork. Do you slave away at work or at school, desperate to get that promotion or to get into that one college to be able to validate yourself as a person? Which voice is the loudest in your life? If the voice you listen to the most isn't God's voice, then eventually you'll experience the same emptiness, confusion, and misery that I felt when I listened to the voice of Linsanity. And so today, I want to quickly address three of the strongest voices in society. Number one, money. Number two, worldly success. Number three, human approval. Let's start with money. In 1923, 9 of the world's richest people secretly met at the Edgewater Beach Hotel in Chicago, Illinois. If these 9 people combined their resources, they have more money than the entire US Treasury. One of these 9 was the president of the world's largest gas company, another was a presidential cabinet member, another was the head of the world's largest monopoly, the president of the New York Stock Exchange, so on and so forth. You would think from a surface level that these 9 people's lives were perfect, but this is how the story ends. By 1948, 27 years later after that meeting, 3 of the 9 died bankrupt. 2 were in prison for embezzlement and bribes. 1 went insane and died in an asylum, and 3 committed suicide. I would argue that none of these 9 people found joy because they were consumed by their money. Every single one of these 9 people could have easily taken their money, retired, and lived very, very comfortably. But they wanted more. And when the Great Depression hit, they either felt they needed to use illegal means to regain wealth, or their life was no longer worth living. If their identity wasn't tied to their money, do you think they would resort to stealing or suicide because of an economic depression? My guess is these people put their identity in their money, and they put their self-esteem and their self-worth in their wealth. First